An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but a glass of OJ keeps the adversary at bay. Here's Oddjob.
And it's time for a glass of OJ. I'm Oddjob. So, before coming out to ShmooCon, which this is where I am right now, before coming out to ShmooCon, of course, something very, very interesting happened. There was a claimed breach on a platform called Okta, which of course is used for all kinds of things regarding single sign-on, two-factor authentication. They have a very heavy zero trust marketplace, I guess sales team and everything. So they talk a lot about zero trust and being part of your zero trust model, which kind of needs to remind us. Much like DLP is not a technology, it is a practice. There is a program around DLP, and then you have tools that help you carry out that program. So DLP is not a technology. Much like that, Zero Trust is also not a technology. You can't just say, oh, we bought Zero Trust. Can't happen. That's not how that works. Zero Trust is actually even more ambiguous than a program or process. It is a philosophy. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of architecting. When you're at the architecture level, when you want to design the user experience, when you want to design an application or design access and design the way your, let's say, workplace devices work, it's Zero Trust. What does that mean? Well, in my opinion, the way I've read various places like Beyond Core from Google and NIST and other things, essentially Zero Trust, kind of a first thing is assume breach. We assume that we are already breached, meaning that there is already a malicious actor inside impersonating people or just acting with the access given to them via the network because of they're inside the network, so they're allowed to go out and do certain things by that virtue. But you've maybe not authenticated exactly who they are to get where they want to be. So kind of one of those first steps on your journey to a zero trust philosophy-based architecture is to get strong identity. What does that mean? Well, that usually means that you have strong password policy. You don't rotate them. Follow NIST. PCI needs to catch up. But you don't rotate your passwords. You make passphrases. But more importantly, honestly, is your password length, but multi-factor authentication. And preferably one that's not SMS, especially for your privileged accounts. You should not be texting one-time codes to your privileged account holders. But you want to have multi-factor authentication. So that's kind of what we mean by strong authentication. We have a way to essentially not trust but verify you as a person, as an entity doing particular actions. So that needs to be authenticated. Well, you can imagine either just you on your own laptop or on a company laptop signing in, and you provide that second factor authentication. So we're pretty sure now that you are who you say you are, and those authentication details, identity details, get verified when you go to your application too. Okay, and you're allowed access based on who you are. The network doesn't just let you travel along the network because you're in the R&D area or VLAN of the network. It lets you go where you need to go because of who you are and what access you are actually allowed. You could plug your laptop into a printer cable, essentially a printer device or a printer where the printers plug in. Supposedly, you should be able to, based on who you are, if you've authenticated via MFA, that port or that network should allow your traffic to traverse the way it needs to. Now, here's another part of that. There needs to also be ways, so that's a way you can kind of start building trust, to then say, we trust that this person's activity is who they say they are because of these factors. Okay. But just like you have a level of trust that you build up to, you start with 0, build up to the trust. Trust has to be challenged at some point. Now a user is going beyond what they usually use. Maybe they plugged into what's usually on the NAC reports as a printer device, and now a laptop is getting plugged in there. That doesn't sound normal. Let's re-authenticate. And let's not just trust what the laptop says. Let's actually have them redo their authentication again. So we're going to have them do their one-time code, or they're going to have their chip card, or whatever they need to do. They're going to need to have that inserted again. They're going to need to authenticate once again in some way. And so that's where platforms like Okta really help. But those other platforms as well kind of go, we're not so sure about this. We might have them re-authenticate. And you may have even situations where, no, this activity is actually egregious for the level of activity that this person usually exhibits. This person's a sales rep. Why are they trying to get into research and development? That's not something they should be getting into usually. So, because that's a more protected area, we're actually not going to just ask for a re-authentication. We're going to report this as an incident. And we're going to disable their account, or we're going to restrict their account. We're going to maybe even restrict their access even further down to even, lesser classified data areas, so that they can't get into more sensitive areas anymore. Because now we need to actually not just trust the strong authentication. Now we need a human to maybe go through and see, is this person really innocent? Is their device compromised somehow? And maybe it's tricking the system. Has Okta been hacked? Has your strong authentication platform been hacked? And people are somehow able to essentially start impersonating folks. Because once again, if you are only basing your trust that you're building up to based on that Okta, that's a single point of ownage or failure. Now, you've got to make sure those are protected. But if the platform itself is going to fail and you have built your entire zero trust architecture around that as your only way of doing that, that's where your failure is going to start being. So this is where it becomes very much a journey rather than a destination, because you have to think about all these things. The more you start laying on third parties for these types of services and these types of places where you're going to trust, you're trusting Okta to tell you, yes, this person is good. You're trusting that level of federation. You're trusting that. So that's where it's always like, oh, what does zero trust mean? Well, aren't you trusting someone? Yeah. But also, if you're assuming breach, then, once again, assuming breach, you can now start seeing behaviors, you can start threat modeling behaviors around salespeople shouldn't be doing XYZ. If we see that, we should probably not let them just re-authenticate to prove who they are. You probably need to raise an incident. Research and development people don't need to go over to the, let's say, the OT manufacturing booth. Maybe they've got their own separate area. IT folks don't need certain access to certain things. Privileged accounts doing things that normal users do, like web browsing. Why? Why are privileged accounts web browsing? Yeah, sometimes they have to bring down, special packages from the internet on servers and things like that. But really, we should have different processes for that. Probably more of the challenge, privileged account wise, is service accounts. That's where you should really be checking, because those are activities usually that are very procedure based, and you should have I always say you should, because you might discover you're not, but you should have a very good idea of what your service accounts are doing. Users act more anomalous all the time. Service accounts shouldn't act anomalous. There should be a baseline for service accounts. They do these things. That's why we created them. So they do these things. Why is a service account now trying to, create a new AD credential or something? Because technically it does have the permission level to create a new AD account. Why is it doing that? You shouldn't trust that service account anymore. Yeah, you shouldn't. should lock that out, or you should raise it as an incident, and you should go down and track that. So consider those things. Remember, as you do multi-factor authentication, many times you are trusting third parties and their infrastructure, and realize that you are adopting some single level of fault. Again, remember that zero trust is a mindset. It is a philosophy. It is a way of thinking that as you start architecting patterns and access and the way data is secured, the way processes are secured, it's not about the tools. The tools help us achieve ends. That's it. And people are at the center of that as well. But the process and the architecture is what matters. So that's what we talk about when we talk about zero trust. So think about that. Don't let any of the vendors coming out right now saying, "Oh, we could have saved you from this. We're the real zero trust technology. We could have saved you." No, don't trust them. Don't trust them at all. So that's my glass of OJ. It's a philosophy. It's not a technology. And don't drink the snake oil that folks out there are trying to give you all the time. What do you think about this? What do you think about the Okta? I didn't go specifically into the actual Okta breach to figure out exactly what all happened. But and also, actually, I'm sorry, I'm gonna one-up myself here. Know what your third parties are using as well, and this is where this comes out too. So not only like Okta, but maybe you have some very trusted service providers. Like maybe you have your Accentures or your E&Ys or your IBMs or your AT&Ts or whomever that are big service providers, right? And you have them in as people who have VPNs, or they have accounts with you. Are they using Okta to manage single sign-on? Are they using Okta for these things? And that's kind of very important for your third party, and honestly your fourth party concerns to worry about. Your SaaS platforms you get on in the background can very well be using Okta to manage the way your authentication works with that platform as well. As they're federating back to your stuff, they may be using Okta to accomplish that. You need to know about those things. You need to know about what platforms people are using as you're integrating SaaS and other people's platforms into your systems and your processes. And so be aware of that, so that as even if you're not in zero trust mode and on that journey, you should be aware of those types of things too. Is what platforms, what things under the hood might someone be using? We learned a lot about this during Log4j, didn't we? Because we found out how many companies are using Log4j out there on their front end or slightly on their back end for processing what their front end is doing. We found out a lot about that. And Log4j was the big thing, I think, that woke people up to more supply chain, but also third and fourth party risk concerns. Is we need to start enumerating. If your strategy is to SaaS or go cloud as much as possible, you need to really be validating what are people using under the hood. So that way, when incidents like this do come out, you can go through and figure out who do you need to call now, and validate, especially if you have highly sensitive data in there, customer data, research development data, sales data, whomever, whatever it may be, revenue data, who knows. Whatever you've got up there, you need to figure out, is my stuff now vulnerable to that? Is my stuff possibly in danger? Do we need to start engaging them in some kind of incident response or discovery? Do we need to do that? And that will help you enumerate who you need to start talking to from a vendor management perspective. So that, I think, is the last bit of OJ on that. Let me know what you think. What are some other considerations with this? What do you think of the Okta breach? How has it affected you in your operations? And what's your thought on zero trust? Did what I say sound like complete bullshit? What's your opinion on it? Do you have something to talk about your journey? How's your journey in Zero Trust doing? Do you feel like you're just always at the beginning of it, never in the middle, never towards the end of it? Where are you at it? Let me know down in the comment section, tweet at me, or find me on LinkedIn, and tell me what you think about it. I'll see you in the next one.